Okay, so the first thing is that the probability that you'll be happy because you've accomplished something in any permanent sense is virtually zero. Well, the reason for that isn't what positive emotion is for. Positive emotion is to indicate that you're making progress towards a valued goal.
Yes.
Now
it's the driver, right? Not the finish line.
Exactly. Well, and that's actually pharmacologically separate, right? Because a satiation reward, which would be the accomplishment of something, calms you and stops that program from running. So for example, once you've become vice president, if that was your goal, then the whole pursuing vice president program comes to a halt. Now the problem with that is it leaves you without a goal, and it also leaves empty space, which you immediately have to fill. And so often people feel disquiet because now they don't know what to do, and they miss that rush because they're no longer pursuing something. And so it's very important to know that positive emotion is experienced in relationship to a valued goal. And then the question becomes, well, what's the most valuable goal to pursue? And that's really a metaphysical and a theological question. In terms of the mechanics of feeling, so imagine that you're negotiating the structure of a date with your wife and you're developing a shared vision. And so you say, well, on Wednesday nights, once a week, we're going to go for dinner, and maybe you specify the restaurant, and you're going to make the arrangements, and I'm going to get dressed up, and then we're going to go see a movie, and you're going to pick the movie, and then we're going to have a romantic interlude afterwards, and we'll run that and see how it goes. And then what you want to do is you want to picture that, and you want to watch how your body reacts on the emotional level, and that's a bit of honesty, it's right, and you can see, well, if we went to this restaurant, well, I don't really like that restaurant. I think it's kind of expensive. I had a bad time with the waiters. I don't think I'd be happy there. Then you say those things to your partner. You say, well, I'm thinking this through. I'm imagining it. And here's the objections that are coming up. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I've got this wrong, but I'd like to hear your input because, we want to get this right. Should we reevaluate my feelings about the restaurant, or should we think about a different restaurant? And that should be a question because you don't know. Maybe you're just stupid about the restaurant, or you're cheap, or you're afraid to go there because you don't have the right clothes. I mean, you don't know, right? But if you want to get your feelings in line, you develop the vision, and then you apprehend the vision with your feelings. It's kind of what you do when you go to a movie and you fall into the fantasy of the character, you embody all the emotions and you evaluate it that way. If you're driven by a vision, that's positive emotion, because approaching something positive in a visionary manner generates positive emotion. If you're only fleeing from things you don't want, then you're constantly in a state of anxiety and depression. That's how it works, because
where did that go? Where did we lose a shared vision? Why can't somebody put a flag in the ground and say, this is where we're headed? That seems to be gone.
Yeah, well, that's a complicated question, I mean, I would say that's the consequence in the most fundamental sense of the death of God in the most fundamental way. It's the death of a sense of higher order unity. Eh? Now, it's also a very complicated question. If you ask someone, what do you want? If you could ask your wife that, what do you want? You'll probably freeze her into immobility, because it's really like asking, how do you want all of your life to go? Please summarize. And one of the things that, well, it's a lot, and one of the ways that you can deal with that, which you undoubtedly know as someone who's conversant with cognitive behavioral techniques, is you can ask people more micro questions too about what they want. So you might say, well, we did that on the dating front already, right? We talked about that. We talked about how you might think about how you want your meal times to go. We only talked about dinner time, but you could talk about breakfast and lunch as well. And then there are other micro domains that are very crucial that you can also consider. It's like, so you could ask yourself, well, if you could have the education you wanted, what would that look like? If you had the job or career track that would motivate you, just hypothetically, what might that look like? Sketch out a bad plan. If you had some friends, do you want some friends? And if so, how many? And if you had friends and the right number, how much time per week would you like to spend with them? And if you had some time outside of work and familial responsibilities, what might you like to do with your time that you would really like to do? And the thing about these questions is that they're real questions. You know, there's this gospel statement that if you knock, the door will open, and that if you ask, you will receive, and if you search, you'll find. If you seek, you'll find. And people who are faithless in some sense think about it as kind of a Hallmark greeting card approach to the world. It's just, well, you just ask for things and they appear. It's like, no, that isn't what any of that means. It means nothing that you want will manifest itself unless you aim for it. And you won't aim for it unless you know what it is, and you won't know what it is unless you ask yourself. And then you might say, well, why don't you ask yourself? And the answer is, well, maybe no one ever explained to you that you needed to, which is a crucial issue. And then maybe you don't also trust yourself. You know, because you might think, well, if I let myself know what I wanted, given my bloody track record, I would do everything I could to screw it up. So I'll just keep myself opaque to myself so that I don't fail at something that's truly important. And then I can always regale with myself with the idea that, well, I didn't succeed, but I didn't really try. Had I really tried, I might have succeeded. Whereas if you let yourself know what you want and then you try, you also set the preconditions for failure. So it's risky.
That's right.
But the alternative is, well, you don't know what you want. So it is a meditative practice. Like, okay, if I could have what I wanted, imagine the world was constituted so that the entire planet wouldn't explode in an apocalypse if I got what I needed and wanted. Yeah, right. It's like, what would that be? So you might say, well, who should I be? And you might think, well, I should be the college president, I should have this car, I should have this house. Those are all very particularized versions of yourself. And the problem with them is that they're concrete and final actualities and not processes. And so here's a good vision. That's a high order vision. And I think it's the vision that our whole culture is founded on. I should be the person who genuinely confronts the problems and challenges that confront me in my life. So that's an attitude of active and voluntary engagement, right? I'm going to do
That's an identity, yes.
Yeah, and it's an identity of process as well. It's like, I'm going to be someone who doesn't shy away from the challenges of life. Okay, and then
I'm a guy who confronts it. Yes.
Right. And so that's St. George and the Dragon, and that's a precondition for therapeutic transformation. Because in order for you to improve, you have to identify the problem, the dragon, and you have to be willing to face it voluntarily. And so you say to yourself, I'm going to do what I can to develop the courage to confront the problems in my life voluntarily. That's who I want to be.